everyone, I'm Danny Roddy of DannyRoddy.com, and today I'm talking with Georgie, an independent health researcher and owner of IdealabsDC.com. Today, Georgie and I will discuss part 2 of the user questions from Patreon and the Danny Roddy Weblog Facebook page. In addition to thanking Georgie for talking with me today, I'd like to thank my patrons for making this show and all of the content I produce possible. If you would like to become a patron, please go to patreon.com/DannyRoddy. As always, please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. And in the spirit of William Blake, the true method of knowledge is experiment. Without further ado, here's the show. Cool, man. We have like 13 questions, and feel free to expand and answer them in any direction that you care to. Some of them are kind of like yes, no questions, and then other ones are a little bit more complicated. So we cached a lot of the Patreon questions the first time we talked, and then had tons of Facebook questions. And I feel like I'm going to hurt some people's feelings because I didn't pick some of them because I just thought they were either too personal or they were like, and maybe not that useful to other people, or I just felt like they had maybe been answered many, many times. What are your thoughts on tooth decay and reasons and solutions to that problem?
I think we touched upon a little bit on that on the osteoporosis episode. The tooth health is very closely related to overall bone health. It has been shown that people that have a very poor production of carbon dioxide and high levels of lactic acid, or in general, basically people that are under stress, they have much poorer tooth health. And one of the ways you can see that, and it probably surprises a lot of people when they hear about it, but basically athletes have extremely, the more competitive they are, the poorer the health of their teeth is. And in general, athletes are really in not that good of a health anyways, despite what you may see as advertised on TV. I think many people are becoming more and more aware when they see these people from NFL and NBA dying in their like 40s and 50s. These people overexert themselves, and it was shown as early as the 1930s, I think, the health of the enamel and the ability of the tooth to regenerate itself and to resist the acidic environment in the mouth. It is directly related to the availability of T3, the active thyroid hormone in the blood. I suppose one way to try to counteract that tooth decay, if it's minor, would probably be to increase thyroid function, try to increase carbon dioxide production, supply calcium, of course, and vitamin D and vitamin K. I think you really need all of the factors, and your teeth are like your brain. I think they're the first ones to go if something is not right with your health, which is not surprising. Basically, it's not one of the crucial functions, and the brain is crucial, but it's very sensitive to energy deprivation. People who have poor teeth have been shown to be prone to cardiovascular disease, dementias, and several other neurodegenerative conditions. And I think it shows the tight correlation between the availability of energy and the health of your bones and your brain in specific. Some other things that can be done that have been shown to be helpful are low dose of the antibiotic, the tetracycline antibiotics. I think there was a human study that showed that 20 milligrams twice a day for 6 months stopped ongoing tooth decay. I don't think it reversed it, but it stopped some pretty bad cases where basically people thought that they're gonna have to go and get like root canals filled in and maybe even extracted teeth. But low dose tetracycline, low enough to not have any antibiotic activity, at least as far as the researchers were concerned, was shown to be able to stop tooth decay. Again, I would, in order to sort of at least stop the process, I would try to improve thyroid function, make sure carbon dioxide production is good enough. You can do the blood test for that, and then of course provide sufficient calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K. Just loading yourself up on calcium and vitamin D, which is what some dentists seem to recommend, I don't think will be sufficient because, as you well know, calcium, especially in combination with vitamin D, can be dangerous because in hypothyroid people it tends to accumulate not in the bones in your teeth but in soft tissue. So I think it's very important to do vitamin K as well and thyroid.
Do you want to clarify that a little bit, because it's going to throw a lot of people for a loop, just because Ray's One of Ray's huge recommendations is just for calcium for low thyroid people. On the sliding scale, the spectrum of problems with low thyroid people, do you think having more calcium in the diet is problematic?
I don't think it's problematic. I just don't think in the context of fixing teeth, taking calcium by itself is going to do, it's going to be sufficient.
Yeah.
So I think you definitely need the vitamin D, which is going to help with the calcium absorption. And also the vitamin D participates in the production of several proteins that are responsible for the regeneration, the osteoblasts, they're responsible for generation of the teeth and the bones. But also it needs vitamin K to decarboxylate these. So these are the activated proteins. So without those, you may end up with some soft tissue calcification as well. But so all I'm saying is that yes, calcium is beneficial, but if you up your dose and the other factors are not right, at the very least, it's probably not going to help your teeth much.
And not like Ray is the law of the land, but I think he mentioned that essentially everything is dangerous to a low thyroid person.
Yeah.
And calcium was the least dangerous thing, I guess.
I mean, it may have the benefit of some people have found that taking any of the bicarbonate metals, because the eggshells I think they have mostly calcium bicarbonate, because the bicarbonate raises their carbon dioxide production. That may be the beneficial effect more so than really the calcium they're getting. If you load yourself up on calcium citrate, which is one of the worst salts that you can buy, because the citric acid not only you'll dissolve your bone and teeth even more, but it can activate dormant tumors. It can do a lot of other bad things. It can actually inhibit the Krebs cycle if it's taken in excess. So the calcium citrate salt that is pretty much the standard recommendation and prescription by dentists, that is not going to be beneficial for your teeth. If you're going to if you're going to be supplementing with calcium, it's probably better if it comes from the diet or using the carbonate salts, which I think even Ray recommended. He said that magnesium carbonate and calcium carbonate were probably the safest things you can take as a supplemental metal.
Georgie, what are your thoughts on feeding children and if your child had bad allergies?
If the allergies manifest themselves really early in the when the child is born, like within the first 6 months, and I do know some couples that have had this problem. Of course, my statistical sample is not statistically significant, but the 5 families that I know, every single one of them, the mother had a C-section, the mom was under pretty severe stress while she was pregnant, and 3 of the 2 mothers actually have proven hypothyroidism. So, of course, this confounds the whole situation a little bit. But, the children that I see that do not have the allergies overwhelmingly tend to be breastfed, and they tend to come from families that have lower levels of stress. Allergies are ultimately, again, a function of thyroid. And there's an old study from the 1950s which showed that at least in adults, you can actually stop a typically deadly peanut allergy by administering again the active thyroid hormone T3. Now I don't know if that is advisable to do in children, but I think it illustrates the point that how you react to your environment is largely determined by your energetic status and your thyroid function. At the very least, if what I would do if I had this option would be if the child is fed formula, I would try to move away from that. You can probably try just giving it goat milk. Even though the pediatrician may be against it, there was something about goat milk that I didn't like. I think because it's low in tryptophan and in one of the vitamins, I believe maybe biotin. Believe it or not, in third world countries, because the mom is very often malnourished, and if her milk stops, then they have very little choice but to feed the child something else, and that something else is usually goat milk, and these children tend to do fine. Food allergies are almost unheard of in third world countries. If we assume that goat milk is dangerous, these people are doing just fine as far as food allergies are concerned. Other things that can probably help is making sure that the child's colon doesn't get irritated. And unfortunately, a lot of the formulas, they already contain carrageenan and some other allergenic additives, such as agar gum, guar gum, the locust bean gum, basically all of the gums that are used as emulsifiers. They're just as bad as carrageenan, even though only carrageenan is being present in the news lately. And that's mostly because there's some European institutes that do some heavy research with carrageenan and have already proved that it's carcinogenic to the colon, at least in adults. But all the other emulsifying gums are not any safer. So I would check the label carefully of whatever your child eats and make sure that it eats as clean food as possible. If there's no breast milk available, I would try to switch to another animal type milk. I've seen studies on camel milk. I've seen studies on goat milk. I've seen studies on chimpanzee milk, but you're probably not going to get that very easily. Um, so overall, the better your child's thyroid function, the more resistant it should be to allergies. And I guess a big one in this resistance and to allergies and the improvement of thyroid function would be the avoidance of tap water because it contains enough fluoride to inhibit your child's thyroid. You can actually see that on blood tests. I witnessed a child that did nothing, that drank nothing but formula dissolved in tap water. And basically, the child had a thyroid test, a blood thyroid test, 2 days after she was born because they suspected since the mother was heavily hypothyroid. And then 6 months later, the thyroid was normal at birth. And then 6 months later, the child, after being fed nothing but formula dissolved in tap water, was actually already hypothyroid. And it could be the formula. Formula was pretty bad too. But I think that the fluorinated tap water plays a big role in this.
And if the child was a toddler and had the allergies, is there any reason you shouldn't treat the child like an adult?
You can, but the problem is that the dosage is for thyroid is very different for children. And most doctors, they don't even know how to treat adults with thyroid. And your pediatrician, if you mention thyroid for a newborn, they're probably going to call social services. So I would be very careful how I approach this because pediatricians tend to think that anything that's considered stimulating for your child is bad. That's one of the reasons why caffeine is officially contraindicated for any child, even though the problem with caffeine for children only happens after basically they reach the adult dose, which is a few hundred milligrams. I don't believe many people are giving their children to drink pure coffee, just like adults are. So, if your child has a sip or two here of like Pepsi or sugar sweetened Pepsi or Coke, or even a little bit of coffee or tea, that's not going to be that detrimental. So if you can convince your doctor to try natural desiccated thyroid, I think it will be helpful. But another study that I saw is that most children with food allergies tend to grow out of them when they become adults. So the good news is that probably because when the child grows up, they're more aware of what they eat and they have a chance to improve their health. Most of the children grow out of these allergies unless they're really bad. The peanut allergies tend to be pretty bad in the sense that they can cause anaphylactic shock pretty easily and they're more difficult to grow out of. But a very close family to mine, their child had egg allergy for the first 6 months of his life. And then within 9 months after basically the mom, she's originally from Jordan, the mom started feeding him little doses of egg yolk, basically small enough for him to only get a rash, but not really start swelling and, having difficulty breathing. And within 3 months, he was fine. He was able to tolerate eggs just fine. So now he eats like a normal person.
Food or supplements? Danny, I recall previously you trashing your large volume of daily supplements. Do you or Georgie take any supplements now?
I do take supplements, yeah. Some of the things that I do take, I take niacinamide on a daily basis. Sometimes I take thiamine maybe once a week if I feel like I'm getting mentally sluggish. And, if I drink my sugar sweetened Pepsi and I don't feel like it's doing much good, I usually take a little bit of allithiamine, which is one of the fat soluble versions of thiamine. I take 50 milligrams, 50. That's just one capsule. Maybe once or twice a week, I take pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is the activated version of vitamin B6. There are many reasons for that, but one of the main ones is that that's probably one of the simplest, most profoundly acting, and safest supplements you can take to lower the effect of stress on your body. Pyridoxal phosphate is the main endogenous compound that the body is using to protect itself from excessive cortisol and adrenaline. Another one of these is DHEA, the hormone DHEA. But if you're not into hormones, you don't have that many choices other than taking, vitamin B6. And as I'm going to post soon on the forum, niacinamide, vitamin B3 also happens to lower cortisol as well. If I take stuff, I try to take stuff that lowers the effects of stress that I cannot lower myself due to, poor diet or truly unavoidable stress. I mean, basically, let's face it, in many people's lives these days, there are events and other people that impose stress upon us, and they cannot be easily avoided, if at all. So I do believe personally for myself that I do need to, and I do feel better after taking certain supplements, but I don't go overboard. I used to experiment a lot, and I still do. But let's say if you caught me 2 or 3 years ago, I would tell you that I was at some point taking maybe about 15 different supplements per day. That was confounding the factors too much. So as my health improved, I found that I don't need many of these. And also, as I was isolating them one by one, I managed to figure out which ones seemed to affect me the most in a beneficial way. And I'm only stuck into these. And again, even these are not being taken every day, except for niacinamide. And lately, I've been taking DHA just like Ray does, but very low dose, only five milligrams. I think he takes between 2 and 4. But because mine are capsules, I take 5 milligrams DHA. Other than that, I take once a week. I take the fat soluble vitamins. I take them topically. I think Ray does the same thing. And then let's see anything else. Occasionally, I take aspirin if I'm feeling my stomach is feeling queasy, or I feel like I'm coming down with some kind of a flu quote in quotes, because it could be endotoxin. And in my case, I've found that in most cases it is actually because a decent dose of charcoal or as little as one tablet, 325 milligrams of aspirin, manages to greatly decrease my symptoms. So I've gotten to the point where most of the stuff that I take is reactive. In other words, I only take it as needed, with the possible exception of niacinamide, which I find more and more about the amazing qualities of the substance. And because it is so safe, and because it has so many different mechanisms through which it acts, I usually take it on a daily basis.
For me, I take thyroid with an emphasis on T3. I take aspirin, vitamins A, D, and K. And then I have antibiotics and cyproheptadine kind of on hand for any occasion. But those have been the main ones for the last few years, and then intermittent experimentation with other things.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I also have like cyproheptadine with myself, and some of the tetracyclines, but I use these very, very occasionally. Cyproheptadine is basically if I'm so exhausted that I know that the next day I'm going to feel like crap, even if I take thyroid, say, or caffeine. Sometimes I take between 2 and 4 milligrams of cyproheptadine, but that's so rare that I don't really consider it supplementation. It's more like, if you get sick, you may take something, but that doesn't really qualify as a regimen. It's more like whatever happens to you that you take measures.
And also the beginning of this person's question, the food or supplements, I don't even think that's a real question.
Definitely food.
Yeah, I do think Ray is unequivocally right about the eggs, oysters, and liver. And I think if you're trying to do this without those foods, good luck. That's my thoughts on it, and they've evolved over time. And Georgie, I don't know how you feel about that, but
I mean, the same way. If there was synthetic food that had proven equivalent to the natural food that we're eating, trust me, by now a company would have monopolized it, and there would be a law banning you from eating natural food so that you go and buy this expensive synthetic product. I mean, there are many reasons to prefer the natural foods to the supplements. And like I said, of course I prefer natural foods, but if I know for a fact that the specific food that I'm eating is likely to be compromised already by pharma or the big food industry, believe it or not, only 2 companies own more than 90% of the food market in the United States. So almost everything you eat, even if it's organic, it's probably already owned by one of these large companies. And little by little, they're doing everything possible to erode the standards so that it's cheaper for them to produce it, but they still charge you the same high price. And I caught actually one company, I'm not going to mention its name, but here's what they did in specifically in Whole Foods. So they introduced a product, right? And initially, I'll tell you, it was a milk-based protein product. And initially, it was certified as organic, right? And then it commanded pretty high price. So I think it was one little bottle which had 20 grams of protein was $4.99, $5.99, something like that. And then within 6 months, basically they kept selling this product, but after 6 months, the little organic, the green and white USDA organic sticker that was on the back of the bottle, it disappeared. And it was replaced by something that said non-GMO natural, right? Which means nothing. But the price stayed the same. So how many people do you think noticed that little change? I mean, everything stayed the same. The exact same product, exact same name, the exact same packaging, everything. And the only thing that changed is that the company stopped paying for other companies to come and audit it, and basically the product was no longer certified as organic. There you have it. Many companies will try to bait and switch approach. So the food that you're eating, if you know for a fact that you're eating natural and good food, uncontaminated food, produced by yourself or people that you trust, by all means, of course, the more of your nutrition that comes from food, the better for you. But if you're like me and live in the city, and you know for a fact that so many things around you are compromised, including the air that you breathe, and in the water that you don't want to consume, but it's in all of these products that you buy because all of them are prepared with tap water, in my opinion, there's some measures that we need to take, specifically trying to counteract some of these endocrine disruptors that are in the environment, some of the heavy metals that are everywhere. So stuff like that. I don't think it's completely negatable. Just like Ray said, it's impossible to have a perfect food supply, but you do the best you can with the things you have.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the thing I often see is somebody emailing me and trying to replace the food. I don't want to kick a dead horse too much, but for instance, like the liver pills, like they can't get over the taste of liver. Like I don't like liver either, but like you gotta like make it work. We're trying to make it work. That's why I went through two great lengths to make the pate, because I was like, oh, I can do this. I guess it's a commitment to like incorporating foods and trying to make them as edible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many other ways to eat liver. There's the liverwurst, which I've thought. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound stereotypical, but I think in general Americans don't like organ meats. At least my coworkers don't. But when I've introduced them to liverwurst, everybody loved it because it's so greasy and it's tasty and it's like it's got paprika inside and some other spices. Everybody loved it, but it's almost pure liver. At least the ones that we're getting from the local grocery store. So they started eating it, on a very regular basis. And the ones that didn't like that one either, we went to Whole Foods and I showed them they're a lot more expensive than the liverwurst, but there are these like red wine and cognac duck liver pate. I mean, that's pretty tasty stuff. Even those people that were very squeamish about eating the liverwurst, they love the pate. So I think there are many ways to get your liver if you really want to get your liver. And if you don't, if there is some convenience reason for you to take the pills, there are companies out there that actually sell desiccated liver powder, just like they sell the desiccated liver thyroid. At least try to get that, because
that Ray has called that into question. He says it has way less of the actual nutrients that you're eating liver for. So that is the thing people tell me they're taking, and then it will be months of them taking it, and like for instance they'll have issues maybe relating to vitamin A, and it just nothing appears to be resolved. So
yeah.
I don't know for sure. I don't know. I'm sure somebody has had success with it, but I guess I would be skeptical of anything that tries to replace eggs or oysters or liver or something like that. But feel free to experiment with anybody who's listening.
Absolutely. And also keep in mind that the so-called net nitrogen utilization, which is a measure of how good a protein is for you, how much of it you actually convert into muscle and other proteins. The eggs and milk have basically the value of NNU, it ranges between 0 and 1. The higher, the better. And milk and eggs are defined as 1. It's by definition. That's like the best protein you can get. And everything else is below 1. So, but it also serves to illustrate a point for all the people that are strict vegetarians, basically, why it's not that good of an idea to get all of your protein from vegetables. The net protein, the NNU of meat, I believe is 0.82, and liver was actually 0.89, so it was higher than meat. And then basically fish, I believe was about 0.75, and then all of the plant proteins were zero point 0.7 and below. They are on average between 20 to 30% less absorbable, yet less utilizable than animal protein like milk, eggs, meat, and liver. And not only that, but many of these plant proteins come with those estrogenic flavonoids like genistein and diazein that are very popular. I mean, they're not very popular, but they're very common in soy and some other legumes to which the soy belongs. The beans are pretty dangerous, and I think the only safe legume, I think Ray mentioned once, and I've seen studies that try to confirm that, is lentils. Beans are known to cause lymphoma if you eat excessively beans, even if you mix it with rice and try to do a complete protein. And they're also resistant starch, so it's going to feed your endotoxin. So there are many reasons to steer towards the animal protein, not only because it's likely to be less estrogenic for you and less endotoxin generating, but also it's better absorbed, it's better utilized. And with age, you need more of that, not less.
Do you want to talk about your thoughts on caffeine and aspirin and fatty liver? And this question is, George, you talked about fatty liver a bit in the past, but it'd be great to hear more about it. Thanks.
Basically, if you take very high doses of, let's say, aspirin and niacinamide, in very high doses, these two substances have some studies about them showing that they can potentially inhibit beta oxidation, which is deoxidizing of fats, converting them to acyl-CoA and having them enter the Krebs cycle. So they do inhibit the breakdown through which fatty acids are converted to acyl-CoA, which is the raw material for the Krebs cycle. But that's only in very high doses. I think the dose for niacinamide was 6 grams daily or more. And then for aspirin, I think it was 9 grams daily or more. And in lower doses, basically both of these substances inhibit the synthesis of triglycerides. So they should lower your blood fat, which is what the doctors like to call it. And they also inhibit the enzyme called fatty acid synthase, which is highly overexpressed in people with the metabolic syndrome and especially in people with cancer. So that's actually one of the ways these two substances are beneficial for cancer. It's because despite what many people know, cancer cells are not addicted to sugar. Cancer cells are addicted to fat. And what they do is when you give them sugar, just like diabetic cells, they will convert it to fat and burn the fat, but they will do so inefficiently. So some of the sugar will get converted to lactic acid as well. Diabetic people have the same issue. Cancer cells will break down your protein to convert it to sugar, but then they won't burn the sugar. They'll convert that to fat. And basically, this is how cancer cells survive. Recent study using, I believe it was melanoma cells, showed that fatty acid oxidation inhibitors, and they used a drug called etomoxir, which is very toxic, but it's being considered now as basically the state of the art chemotherapy. Was able, as soon as they added this drug to the cells, the tumor disappeared. And the study concluded by saying inhibiting lipolysis or fatty acid oxidation may be a viable approach to treating cancer. But back to the niacinamide and aspirin, I think in the doses which Ray recommends, and even higher, if anything, they should help to lean your liver out. In addition, niacinamide is a precursor to NAD, and the NAD to the NADH ratio has been shown to be the primary factor which determines whether you will develop an NAFLD, which is the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or the alcoholic fatty liver disease, or cirrhosis. Even if your liver is storing a lot of fat, which it will be if you're trying to run excessively on lipolysis, niacinamide will protect you from that. And it will also help you excrete some of these fats because, again, the NAD to the NADH ratio determines the efficiency of the glucuronidation process, which is how your liver excretes some of the fat that makes it back to the liver from your bloodstream. So I don't think there is any reason to fear aspirin and niacinamide because of liver health. And by the way, it was shown that a dose of aspirin about the same amount as a liver toxic and even lethal dose of acetaminophen, paracetamol is also called, prevented all deaths from the overdose. So aspirin happens to be highly protective for your liver, and so is niacinamide. Caffeine is also extremely beneficial for the liver. It has been used successfully in some countries to reverse cirrhosis, just like the studies with saturated fat. And the doses don't seem to be that high. I think the human study that I saw, it was a low-grade cirrhosis, so it was very early in the stage. But keep in mind, cirrhosis is the last stage of liver disease. After that is liver failure, and you need a transplant. But basically, a beginning stage of cirrhosis was fully reversed by about 600 milligrams of caffeine taken for 6 months. So caffeine is also known to help your liver a lot. And one of the reasons is it leans it out. Actually, it forces the liver to flush its fat. Also helps the process of glucuronidation. So if you're taking them in the doses that are normally found in, let's say, caffeine in coffee, and you take a few tablets of aspirin per day and a few hundred milligrams of niacinamide per day, that should do nothing but improve your liver health. I have not seen a person who has had any liver issues using these doses of these three supplements. It's only the very high doses that are known to cause issues, and there are some studies that show that. Take 10 grams of aspirin, you may get liver toxicity. Take 10 grams of niacinamide, you may get liver toxicity. As a matter of fact, jaundice, yellowing of the skin, especially of the face and of the eyeballs, it's a very well-known side effect of high-dose niacinamide. If you take more than, I think the cutoff officially is 3 grams, but clinically it's known that it's 9 grams or more. That's one of the reasons why niacinamide is not used as a primary agent in chemotherapy. Believe it or not, there are actually a few hundred studies showing that niacinamide greatly sensitizes tumor cells to chemotherapy and also can cause apoptosis of the actual tumor. I posted a study recently on the forum which showed that only 3 grams, human equivalent dose of only 3 grams of niacinamide fully prevented metastasis from lung cancer and breast cancer. That's pretty much a breakthrough discovery, and the mechanism was, again, the NAD to the NADH ratio. However, the reason I'm bringing this up is that the explanation why niacinamide is not used as a primary agent for chemotherapy is because most people think it's liver toxic, and it has been known to cause liver issues, elevation of liver enzymes, and jaundice clinically in doses of 9 grams or more per day. And unfortunately, it seems that the therapeutic value for cancer, the concentration, most of the studies have been done in vitro using niacinamide as a primary agent, but the concentration is between 2 millimoles or higher. And unfortunately, in order to achieve a concentration of 2 millimoles in the cells, you need a dose of about 10 to 12 grams of niacinamide per day. 6 grams of niacinamide achieve 1 millimole. Unless you're treating something like that, unless you're treating cancer and you're taking nothing but niacinamide, I don't think you have a reason to ingest 9 grams or more. So if you stick to even the official recommendation of 3 grams or less, I think not only you'll be fine, but your liver should actually heal.
I'm going to combine these two together. Have you experimented with enriching your environment? How so? And what day-to-day activities have you noticed to be pro-metabolic and enriching? For example, painting a portrait.
I mean, I've always wanted to pick up some kind of an art. I didn't do it at an early enough age, and right now with having a family and several jobs, I don't seem to have that much time for it. What was actually fun for me is what I'm doing right now through the Ray Peat forum and the supplements and everything else. You don't have to necessarily do art. I think anything that breaks the routine, anything that gets you out of the authoritarian environment where other people are telling you what to do and are inactivating your internal guidance instinct, which is what Pete called it. Any activity like that would probably be therapeutic. Keeping fun up and stress down, if I can sum it up in one sentence. So just trying to do things that you want to do and not things that you have to do. Obviously, life is not entirely things that you want to do, but whenever you can break that routine, I think it will be therapeutic. To me, I actually like sports a lot, so every once in a while I play soccer. Being outside, being among happy, healthy people, which this also correlates with youth, unfortunately, nowadays. So being around younger, happier, healthier people also seems to be very therapeutic. I do one thing that actually Ray gave me the idea, and I have verified that through my research. Once a week, I try not to read anything, and I try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible. So try to quiet down the verbal center of the brain, because the more verbal you are, the more analytical you are, the more you're moving towards the serotonin system. So yeah, my recommendation would be, again, do anything that you really like, that you're really passionate about. And if that's not possible, at least try to get away a little bit from an environment that is routine and authoritarian.
I play the guitar every day and then experimented with enriching your environment. I found that just including plants in my room was like a game changer. And so I started getting more plants, and taking care of them has been kind of a challenge because I'm a plant idiot. So that has been fun. And yeah, I walk downtown for basically no reason almost every day, just to do a long walk, and that always helps too. I find like sometimes when I'm trying to think of new ideas, like, or if I'm thinking about hair loss and stuff that I don't know about exactly, sometimes taking a walk and not reading will give me like ideas that I haven't had before. And that's kind of been a constant throughout this whole journey. So I try to make time to do that.
Taking long walks was actually was a preferred activity for many great scientists, many of them Nobel Prize winners, believe it or not. Einstein was very well known to do that. Kurt Gödel, the author of the incompleteness theorem, was known to do that. Poincaré, the physicist, was known to do that. Dirac, another physicist, was known to do that. David Bohm, whose theories I love, and they seem to be getting more and more confirmed these days, he was also known to do that. Basically, it's a great way to clear up your thoughts and reset your thinking process. And the way this is done is largely by basically stopping your excessive thought for a little bit, and then you can regroup and look at things from a new perspective.
And Georgie, I wanted you to talk more about this, because the last time we talked about Tyromax, the thyroid product from Idea Labs, it was when you were just releasing it. Well, this person wants us to talk about Tyromax and its strength and the best way to use it, and anything you've learned since releasing that product, just from user feedback or you testing it on yourself and friends more.
So the reason I chose a combination of DMSO and ethanol versus purely ethanol, because I tried that one as well, is because the thyroid powder, keep in mind that it's actually tissue, it's ground up tissue. it seems to dissolve a lot better when there is DMSO present. Even though some of it sediments to the bottom, I think the majority of it is actually getting dissolved in the liquid. So that's one reason. Basically, it improves the process of dissolving the active ingredient inside of the liquid. And the second reason is that, as I've posted several studies on the forum, DMSO itself seems to do two things that no other substance that I know of is known to do. One of them is pretty much ensure an absorption through the skin that rivals the absorption delivered by subcutaneous administration. And subcutaneous administration is considered the gold standard for doing any kind of transdermal delivery of steroids. If you take some kind of a steroid, and thyroid hormone is a steroid, DMSO seems to be able to give you a bioavailability that rivals the one that subcutaneous would do. And subcutaneous would be somebody, there are these pellets actually. In some countries, they're approved as a drug for hypothyroidism. They're the size of a very small capsule, and they insert these under your skin. And basically, these pellets release thyroid hormone directly into your bloodstream over the course of, let's say, a month. And there are a few studies that I posted on forum that show that if you dissolve thyroid hormone, it was different. It wasn't thyroid. But it was out of steroids. I did take a little bit of a leap of faith here, but it seemed to work for all the other steroids. So I assumed it probably is going to work for thyroid as well. And I confirmed that with blood tests as well. So, anyways, one of the main reasons for using DMSO is that it dramatically improves the absorption through the skin. And the second reason is that DMSO seems to be able to deliver the whatever steroid you're dissolving in it a lot more effectively to the actual tissues and cells than if the hormone was dissolved into some other carrier. Again, the studies used other steroids like progesterone, testosterone, hydrocortisone, I think even estrogen. But basically, what they found was that even though the blood levels did not change by much, tissue levels everywhere within 6 hours of administering testosterone and estrogen dissolved in DMSO, within 6 hours, every tissue that was biopsied and sampled had elevated levels of the steroid, and the blood did not. I mean, it did show elevations, but they were not really as big as the elevation of the levels in the tissues. And I think that underscores yet again Pete's statements that the blood levels of hormones should not really be trusted. What matters is what happens inside the cell. And unfortunately, the only way to really gauge that is to do a biopsy or to look at other functional biomarkers such as temperature, pulse, digestion, mood, cognition, things like that. So if you're taking Thyromax and you finding that it improves your mood, it improves your thinking abilities, it improves your sleep, it improves your digestion, I think that counts a lot more. And I do encourage people to, if they're willing to go and do a biopsy. I mean, you can. Some doctors' offices can do a cheek swab, and that can give you some idea of what your levels of thyroid hormone in the tissues are. You don't have to do the needle biopsy, which is really painful, even though that's the most reliable method. And then some other things, I guess, that you can do is I think TSH would be a very reliable indicator. Prolactin would be another one. Basically, if you really want to see if Thyromax is working for you, I would focus on the functional parameters and a few blood tests to make sure that you're getting what you really need to be getting out of this product. And there are a lot of other things that can be said about it, but unfortunately, FDA limits me legally what I can say publicly.
Yeah, you can't officially say to take it orally, but if the product contains thyroglobulin and it needs to be digested, can I say that
sure,
you should try you should take it orally? Because I think what I understand you're saying is it'd be a mixed bag. I think one of the things I like about Sinoplus is exactly what you're going to get when you take that product, and I think it can be confusing if you're taking a product topically and you don't exactly know what's going to happen. And maybe that's okay for a topical steroid, but it might be a little bit more iffy. So I encourage experimentation if you don't want to take something orally to try it topically. But I know a lot of people really depend on thyroid to function well. So I would just encourage the people that maybe weren't having success topically to try orally. I think that would make sense, but it's not my product, so I don't know. But I know that you're hands are tied a little bit because of the
Yeah,
FDA.
and here's the thing. I know some people are, again, with a disclaimer that this is only approved for topical use. I only have the license for topical use. If some people are willing to take it orally, keep in mind that DMSO is actually a drug approved by the FDA for treating a human condition called interstitial cystitis. And I think it's a kidney condition. And the dose is several tens of grams orally per day. In the doses that are in Thyromax. Basically, if you're sticking to the recommended, let's say you're taking 1 grain, that's only 8 drops of Thyromax, and inside those 8 drops, that's basically, so 8 drop, that's 1/3 of a gram. So basically, 24 to 25 drops is 1 milliliter of liquid, and basically 3 grains of thyroid are inside it. So you take 1/3 of that, which means 333 milligrams essentially, because there's some discrepancy between the volume and the how much material is inside. But let's say you basically that amounts to 333 milligrams of liquid. Of that, no more than 70% is actually DMSO. So let's say at most 250 milligrams, maybe even 200. 200 milligrams, most people won't even taste that. And if you do, it can always be dissolved in some kind of a fruit juice, or put in a soup, or something else that will almost completely eliminate the taste of DMSO. Whatever concerns people had about DMSO toxicity, keep in mind, and of course, FDA is not to be trusted on all things, but one thing they are good at, is determining whether something has long-term toxicity or not. And unlike the chemotherapy drugs, where, believe it or not, FDA approved them but doesn't claim that they're non-toxic. Basically, they're saying the disease is so bad that we're going to approve something that may kill you through other means, and these chemotherapy drugs are toxic. In the case of DMSO, the FDA explicitly said that basically the risk of chronic toxicity with the doses used for the interstitial cystitis is very low, and we're talking about 30 to 50 grams per day. And with one dose of of Thyromax, basically the 1 grain, let's put it this, 1 grain, you're taking less than 1% of that, less than 1%. So I cannot fully prove that this is safe. Unfortunately, that's not how science works. However, in the absence, so far, nobody has reported any side effects with the exception of the mild skin irritation, and that when taken topically, and that can be mitigated by dilution. But when the people that have taken it orally, so far, I have not had a single complaint. And if anybody wants me to send them official statements from other people using it, of course, there's no way to verify because I'll have to extract the emails. Somebody can accuse me of cherry picking. But go to the Thyromax thread on the forum and you'll see the vast majority of people who took it orally, actually all of them, the vast majority of people in general, and all of them who took it orally have no side effects to report so far. So it's up to you. But, again, I can only talk about topical administration. FDA is kind of tying my hands.
I think it's good to have a source of thyroid powder in the US, but I think people, if somebody had a bad experience with one product, I would encourage them to try another product, just because in my limited experience, different products act differently, even on the same person. So last question, and this one got a lot of upvotes on Facebook, and it says, slave to Pete. In one newsletter, the whole community can go from completely avoiding mushrooms to making them a large piece of the diet. Do you feel like you are hanging on Ray's every word? Like, what do you think of Ray Peat when you're experimenting or when you're learning? And then I can follow up with my thoughts on that issue.
I actually disagree with Pete on many points. The only thing I do follow is his general guidelines and the theory that unites the things that he writes about. Basically, the guy has a lot more knowledge than I do, so he can make more qualified statements on many topics. But for example, I already listed, I do disagree with him on the point of taking vitamins. I do disagree with him on taking isolated amino acids. I have found personally, and many people who work with me and send me emails and contact me through the forum, that they've taken isolated amino acid supplementation, specifically the amino acids taurine, glycine, theanine, and the branched chain amino acids, and phenylalanine, and tyrosine. And so far, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Of course, you never know exactly what you're ingesting. I mean, anybody who is selling you stuff, in theory, they can be breaking the law and selling you poison. However, if you experiment, you're always undertaking some risk. So if you tried a substance and it has the proper certification that it's not contaminated with with some poison, it doesn't have too many or any bad excipients, and if you feel like your health is improving and you have some objective evidence for that, then I think there is a value in supplementing with some isolated amino acids. I also think that going overboard on mushrooms is probably not advisable either, for the same reason. Actually, mushrooms, a lot of them actually get imported from China, and many of them grow on dead animals. I don't know how people feel about that, but I think there was a provider, a very big mushroom importer from China, who got busted last year because when FDA did tests on the mushrooms, they were found to contain depleted uranium, of all things. Again, just by eating stuff and being outside in this world, you are taking a certain amount of risk. I don't agree with Pete fully on everything that he says, especially when it comes to supplementation and diet. I think because everybody is unique, which is what he said, it may take some time for you to find your perfect diet. I know many people who don't do well on milk, period, no matter what they tried. Some of these people ended up actually, they discovered that they have low levels of gastric acid, which apparently many people with hypothyroidism have. I don't think Ray has talked much about that issue and how this can affect the digestion and absorption of milk. And it actually applies to all proteins. But, I know plenty of people who don't do well on milk and they don't eat it that often. Try to find out what works for you within the general guidelines of Pete. And keep in mind, probably with the exception of PUFA and ionizing radiation, there aren't that many divine laws within peatland. There are no Ten Commandments, so to speak. I think avoiding PUFA is a pretty big one. And if you study the biochemistry a little bit, you'll see why. It's really not up to Pete. It's just that's how the body works. If you want to have low inflammation or no inflammation, deplete yourself of PUFA. Without these precursors, no inflammation. It's not really something that Pete invented. That's just how your body works. Some other places where I kind of disagree with him is, I think he disapproves the use of pharmaceutical drugs mostly. I know he has talked to some people about potentially taking bromocriptine and cyproheptadine, but even these drugs he recommends be used sporadically. Well, unfortunately for some people, these drugs are life-saving. And if that's the thing that works for you, and really you've tried everything else and nothing has worked, and your health is so compromised from years of dealing with stress and probably the medical system. There are a few people like that on the forum. They have found, all of them, that cyproheptadine is a life-changing drug for them.
Yeah, I don't want to set up straw man. All right, like I doubt he would object to somebody like that felt well. I know what you're saying. I just don't want to. I don't want to just.
Yeah, I'm not bashing on Pete. I'm sort of responding to people. It's like everybody thinks that we're being a slave to Pete, and I'm just regurgitating what he's saying. Well, most of the studies that I post on the forum, he hasn't included these in his newsletters, and maybe he has yet to mention them. But again, the guy is a great guide into pointing you in the right direction. But I don't think anybody has the illusion that you can just follow him blindly and have stuff work for you out of the box. Maybe for some people, but that's not my experience. I mean, I love his ideas, his open-mindedness, and everything that he has done for this community. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you and me to find out what works for us. There's just some guidelines that we need to look at and try to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I mean, me coming from a background of veganism and then doing a zero carb diet for 2 years, that's being a slave. That is following something despite all sensations telling you not to go further, all ignoring any kind of scientific conflict that I had at the time, whether it be animal foods or carbohydrates, and just following blindly despite my body screaming otherwise. So for me, Ray was a teacher and encouraged me to dive into physiology to a level that I had never done previously. And one of the most common questions I get through email is like, what have you found that he's wrong about? I'm 30 years old. I started this journey relatively, I haven't been on this journey for a long time. And he's like an awesome teacher. It's not like I'm not looking to discredit his different ideas on a lot of different things because maybe I don't fully understand them yet. And so I don't know who would think that he is a typical guru like Mark Sisson or Dave Asprey or Rob Wolf, I don't understand how somebody can read through his work and put him in that category, but people will do whatever they want to do. So.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of the culture that we live in. Basically, everybody thinks that there needs to be some kind of an expert out there who will figure it all out for you, and it will generate a perfect mathematical formula that can never be falsified. It just doesn't work like that, at least in my experience. And just like you, Danny, I mean, basically Ray, it has been nothing short of a lifesaver for me because of what I read from him and what allowed me initially to question my doctors, realize how much bullshit I was getting from them. Literally, people that basically would flip and change their version, the same doctor, over 2 days, and eventually they basically started concocting stuff out of thin air that wasn't anywhere on my records or my imaging or my MRIs. So little by little, you realize that you're in contact with these experts, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be. You should basically that all experts are full of it. All I'm saying is that many of them are, and they will go through great lengths of trouble, to great deal of trouble, to avoid admitting that. And that's really the part that upsets me. And Ray has been such a liberating influence because he's the exact opposite. I think in most cases where I've asked him about stuff that he doesn't know about, he just says, "I don't know much about it." I would love to hear it from my doctor, but unfortunately I don't. Most of the time I'm getting a very definitive answer, almost like a religious dogma, and I'm being threatened that things will start falling apart if I don't follow it. That doesn't sound like, the real world we live in. I think, but unfortunately, it has gotten to the point where everybody's convinced that there needs to be an expert who is always right, and then you need to follow them blindly in order for your health to improve. If anything, I think that's the exact opposite of what Ray is saying. This means it will get you into learned helplessness because you're following somebody so blindly.
Think for yourself and question authority. Georgie, where can we find more of your work on the internet this week?
The best place to find me is probably on the Ray Peat forum, www.raypeatforum.com. I prefer if people contact me through the forum, but if you really don't feel like posting on a public venue and you don't want other people to see and respond to your questions and issues, you can send me an email. And my email address is haidut@gmail.com. My username on the forum is the same, haidut. So you can send me a message or you can post directly on the forum, and I'll do my best to respond. Sometimes it takes me a few days. Please excuse me, but I do get a lot of questions, and it takes me some time. But so far I've answered them all, so I'll do my best to answer yours as well.
Georgie, you're awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
That's going to conclude this week's episode. I'd like to thank Georgie again for talking with me today, along with my patrons for making this show and all the content I produce possible. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Next week, we're going to talk about osteoporosis, and then we're going to mix it up a bit with a new show style that we're still kind of tooling around with. So look forward to that. Again, thank you so much for your listenership, the comments and thumbs up and everything. All the emails I get about the show are so positive and so reinforcing that it just warms my ice cold heart. So thank you very much. Again, please leave any comments you have or constructive criticisms about the show in the comment section, and give it a like if you enjoyed it on YouTube, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Take care.